Hello, friends. We are going to do 3.5 now, and the reason we did 3.6 before 3.5 is it just flows a little bit better that way. I think AP kind of like put it in the wrong order. So we just finished up learning about how aggregate demand can go up or down, causing changes in price level in our GDP, and short-run aggregate supply can go up or down, causing changes in price level in our GDP. And we already learned that smack dab in the middle of that, we have the long run aggregate supply curve, which is our overall economic potential. So I'm going to show you guys, and you're going to follow along in your notes, the way that we can tell on a graph if there's an economic issue or if we are at long run economic full potential, long run aggregate supply. So follow along with me in your notes. This graph that I'm about to do would be a graph that there is nothing wrong in the economy. So we would have upward sloping short run aggregate supply. Sorry, let me make it brighter. Upward sloping short run aggregate supply, downward sloping aggregate demand. And I'm going to go ahead and label those. So this would be SRAS1 and aggregate demand 1. Where they meet would be equilibrium, and from there we would go over, and that would be our equilibrium price level, PL1, and from there we would go down, and that would be our equilibrium output, which we would label Y1. So our GDP is labeled with a Y. Now, if we want to show that where our current economy is, that is where equilibrium is. Where supply meets demand is our current economic state. So this question says, show an economy at full employment output. Full employment output is the fancy term for long run aggregate supply, our long run potential. So they want us to show on this graph where we are, where our economy is, equilibrium, is where full potential is. Like we have the perfect economy, there's nothing wrong. So the way that we show that is by putting the long run aggregate supply curve smack dab through the middle. That's supposed to look a little bit better than it does. Smack dab through the middle so that our current output is the long run output. We would label this long run aggregate supply 1. And this is no longer Y1, it's Y at full employment. And remember, full employment is going to mean that it is the natural rate of unemployment. It's going to be frictional plus structural and no cyclical unemployment. So basically, this is an economy that's perfect. There's the perfect price level where it's not too little that suppliers don't want to make it, but it's not too much that consumers don't want to demand it. It's the perfect rate of unemployment. There's just no issues. So this is what we're always trying to attain. And I kind of think that it looks like either like a sticky bug, like here's the body and here's the wings, or it kind of looks like the North Star, like that's our goal, right? In my head, those are the little ways I trick my brain to remember. But what we're going to be learning today is sometimes, most of the time, our economic situation isn't perfect. There are output gaps, which is what we're going to learn next. So the first one is what I just showed you, where there's no output gaps. It's full employment. We're at the LRAS curve. We're at YF, which would mean output at full employment. There's no gap. You got that sticky bug, star looking situation on your graph. That's what we just learned. There are 2 other options, which is nice because there's only 3 possibilities. It's either perfect, it's inflated, or it's receded. So there are lots of different tricky words for this. Inflationary gap or positive output gap. I'm not going to lie to you, they use this word a little bit more frequently in multiple choice questions and on the AP test. So this means that our equilibrium, where AD and SRAS meet, is above or beyond where it should be on the graph, and that's why it's inflated. We have inflated above where we should be, but more likely than not, you're going to see the term positive output gap. Our output is above where it should be to an unsustainable amount. Think about when you're overexerting yourself, if you're an athlete or maybe you're a singer or you play a musical instrument, there is a point when you are too tired and you keep going and the quality of your work goes down. You know what I'm saying? That's what a positive output gap is. You're working beyond your means and it's not sustainable. The opposite would be over here. They call it a recessionary gap, but more often than not, a negative output gap. The word recessionary means to recede. So think about like your dad's hairline or your grandpa's hairline. He probably used to have hair like near his forehead. And then as he gets older, that hairline recedes. It goes backwards. So it's backwards. It's below. It's less than full employment. And so this is some economic problem where we are not producing as much as our economy is able to do. Unemployment is high, that sort of thing. So we've already seen this one on a graph. We're gonna go look at these two on the graph now. Oh, never mind, I lied to you. It comes back to haunt us, okay? So this graph here on the left, the production possibilities curve, the PPC, it always comes back. It's like a nightmare, it keeps returning. And then unit 2, our business cycle graph, always comes back. So this is the same as what I just did. The graph that I just showed you where we had that like sticky bug star situation. Oh, that was terrible. AD, SRAS, and long run aggregate supply all create like the perfect scenario. Our economy has the perfect price level. Like this is what I'm talking about. This is the same as this graph at full employment. So I'm going to like get my little yellow pen. Anywhere on the line is us operating at full employment. Anywhere on the line is us operating at a natural rate of unemployment. Not too much, not too little, just structural and frictional. That would be a long run aggregate supply, AD and AS all meeting together in the perfect North Star situation. A positive output gap, which I'm going to show you on the long run aggregate supply curve here in a minute, would be up above where we should be, anywhere out here. It's an unsustainable amount. Maybe it's possible for a hot second, but actually it's going to cause economic problems because our potential is not that. We are below that potential. It is above. It is a positive output gap, okay? And then a negative output gap would be anywhere below our potential, anywhere below our production possibilities. Something has happened that we have receded behind where we're supposed to be. In this scenario, something has happened that we have inflated above where we're supposed to be. And we saw this again in Unit 2 when we looked at the business cycle, where we had peaks and troughs, and we had times of expansion, like from here to here, we're expanding, and we had times of recession from like here to here. So this line right here would be like our long run aggregate supply line, LRAS. And anytime we are above that long run aggregate supply, would be any of these points here. That's a positive output gap. You see this gap right here? This is where we are, but this is where we should be. It's a positive output gap, okay? Anytime we are below the line, let me switch back to green. Why'd they do green below? That makes no sense. Below the line, so any of these points, we are below our economic potential. We call the gap between here and here a negative output gap. We have gone behind where we should be. And then anywhere where we are producing the perfect amount, full employment, would be when our business cycle touches the real GDP potential line. So those yellow places right there. And we kind of covered this last unit, but we're going to keep seeing this production possibilities curve and keep seeing this real GDP business cycle. So just keep them in your mind always. They come back to haunt us. Ooh. Okay, so let's graph these things. So I already graphed for you the one that is perfect. Our economy is producing at the perfect potential. Let's now graph one where the economy is not producing at perfect potential, where the economy is operating above where it should be, a positive output gap. So we need to draw a long run aggregate supply curve, right? So we're going to draw in that long run aggregate supply curve. And here's where it gets kind of tricky. So we're going to LRAS1. It's already labeled price level, our GDP. Now we need an equilibrium that is above long run aggregate supply. So our equilibrium dot can't be here, can't be here, can't be here, can't be here, can't be here. It needs to be somewhere to the right of our potential output. Oh, I forgot to label something. Sorry. This is YF. So we need a potential output that is over here. So I'm going to put my little equilibrium here, okay? And I'm going to draw my ADSRAS through it. Aggregate demand, short run aggregate supply, 1. Aggregate demand, 1. This is output 1, and then this is price level 1. Okay? So what we have represented here is that our economy is operating at this output level, and that is above where we should be. And this gap right here, and if I were you in my notes, I would like take a different color since you're at home and you got like colors and stuff, hopefully. You could like circle this and bring it out to the right, and you could call this the positive output gap. I spelled that wrong. We're just going to pretend I didn't. Actual GDP is above our GDP at full employment. It's not sustainable. It's causing prices higher than they should be. Our actual GDP should be along this line somewhere. We need to like bring that down essentially. And what we're going to learn about at the end of this unit is what does the government do to bring that down? Today we're learning like what is the problem on the graph. And then in the future we're going to learn like, well, what does the government do about that problem? Okay. So you could go about it that way, the way that I just drew it, or you could go about it this way. Let me like erase it all. If they were to say, on an FRQ, draw a ADAS model in an inflationary or positive output gap state. You could start by doing it this way, labeling SRAS1, AD1, equilibrium, PL1, Y1, and then thinking, okay, this is where we are, and we are above where we should be. So I could draw long run aggregate supply last. LRA. Oh, sorry. Give me a second. Long run aggregate supply 1. And I get the same effect. It doesn't matter in what order I draw it. The effect is, oh, I didn't label. Wow, I'm terrible. The effect is, here is where our output is, but here is where it should be. There's a gap of inflation. Okay? So that's a positive output gap. And we're going to get into how the government solves that. Not today. So, question. We have this positive output gap. Here's like a pretty picture of it. Which of the following would cause a positive output gap? So let's say we're at the perfect economic potential. We are at long run aggregate supply, SRAS, and AD all meeting in that perfect North Star situation, sticky bug situation, okay? So our graph would look like this. Yay, it's perfect. What of these 4 options, and there are 2, I'll give you a hint, would cause our output to grow above where it should be? Think about that for a second. Hopefully you thought about it. Here we go. Any of these that would cause Y to increase, that would cause our GDP to increase. So let me go through my list. This is something that I have memorized because I teach this stuff, but you could draw every single graph. You could go to your piece of paper that we did in class the other day. You could take your arms and make an X and visualize it, which is literally what I'm doing right now. When AD increases, price level goes up and our GDP goes up. When AD decreases, price level goes down and our GDP goes down. When SRAS increases, sorry, I just did it with my arms, price level goes down, our GDP goes up. When SRAS decreases, price level goes up and our GDP goes down, which is like the bad one. That one's the stagflation one. We don't like that one. That's the cost push inflation one. Okay, so when we're taking a look at that, we need to find one that would cause our output to spring up positively above where it should be. So which ones do output go up? This one and this one. And so if we were to be ever asked what would cause a positive output gap, they wouldn't just give you these options. They would give you something that would cause AD to increase or cause SRAS to increase. So they would say like increase military spending, increase autonomous investment spending, increased productivity, increased technology. Those sort of things can cause a positive output gap up above our capabilities. Okay? All right, let's do the other one and then we'll be almost done. So now let's do the opposite. The problem on this graph needs to be a negative output gap. So I'm going to go the long way around first. I'm going to take long run aggregate supply. I'm going to put it down the middle. I'm going to call it LRAS1. I'm going to come down here and call it YF. You should be doing this in your notes too, following along with me. And so in this situation, our output is lower than it should be. So I'm going to pick an equilibrium point like here, behind where we should be, behind the long run aggregate supply curve, behind output at full employment. And I'm going to make my short-run aggregate supply go through it, and I'm going to make my aggregate demand go through that point. Oh, that was terrible. That was a little better. Okay, now I know that looks like super funky, but I'm going the long way around. So I'm going to call this SRAS 1. I'm going to call this aggregate demand 1. From there, I need my Y1, and I need my PL1. And here is an issue. A gap has opened up. Here is where we should be in terms of output, but here is where we are. We are behind where we should be. And so in your notes, give that a little circle here. Come over here and call this a negative, because it's backwards, output gap, okay? And in this case, that means most likely output has decreased because unemployment is greater than the natural rate of unemployment. We got some cyclical unemployment situation here, is what this is telling us. Let me do the short way around. That was like the teacher way to show you. Let me show you an easier way. So we are going to start with our AD SRAS. I'm going to do this real sloppy. Sorry, guys. Aggregate demand 1. Oh my gosh, that's wrong. Ooh, SRAS 1. Aggregate demand 1. Put your PL, price level 1, and your Y1. Okay. Now, if the question said draw an ADAS model with a negative output gap, we need to now make this a negative output gap. How do we do that? We make it so that the potential RGDP is like we're not there yet. We have receded behind it. So I'm going to take that long run aggregate supply curve. I'm going to put it right here. YF LRAS1. And now you can see that here is where we should be, but here is where we are. We are behind it. Okay? All right. So this is a very similar question. Which of the following would cause a negative output gap? Negative means that our RGDP is below where it should be. So which of these things would cause our GDP to be below? Which of these things would cause our GDP to shrink? And I'm going to go ahead and tell you the answer. It's anything that decreases is going to cause our GDP to shrink below where it should be. Okay? And then there's the like pretty picture of the graph. Here is going to be our little activity. We're going to do like fun stuff because, you know, NTI loves to ruin all our fun. And we don't get to do great things. So here's what we're going to do. Miss Keller was going to project a graph, put you in groups, and then when your group notices why the graph is wrong, you were going to run up and gently on my board, as to not break my board, circle why it's wrong, and then turn around and tell the class why it was wrong. It was going to be fun. We were going to be like running and screaming and, oh, our team gets a point. Sadly, we will not be doing that. Instead, you're going to answer these in the Google form below. Don't you love NTI? Okay, so number 1. You're going to describe to me why this graph is wrong. Heck fire. I'll do number 1 with you. Okay. So you would take a look at this graph, and this graph is supposed to be showing me a positive output gap. And some of you guys have probably already noticed it. In a positive output gap, our output should be above where, oh, sorry, my husband's like screaming in the other room. Jordan, can you shut the door, please? I'm so sorry. So a positive output gap means we should be above where our output is. So hopefully you've already noticed here is output, okay? But we are behind it. So this is not a positive output gap. This is actually a negative output gap. So you would answer like graph actually shows a negative output gap. But there's one more mistake here. So here's the mistake here. I put 2 mistakes in this graph. Can you catch it? There's something mislabeled here. The mislabeling is right here. So for number 1 on the Google form, I'm going to let you go ahead and do it. You would type that the graph does not show a positive output gap. It shows a negative output gap. And that AD was mislabeled. Sorry, SRAS was mislabeled. So you would kind of describe to me what is wrong on the graph. So I'm going to show you these things. You can pause the video. You can go answer it. You can write it down. Put it in the Google form later. Doesn't matter to me as long as you do it. There's number 1. Here's number 2. Number 2 is showing a negative output gap. So what is wrong? Why is this not correct? You're going to tell me. Here is number 3. Lovely. Beautiful. Tell me what's wrong. Should be showing long run full employment equilibrium. Here is number 4. Keep in mind, There's a little hint for the last one. Sometimes there's more than one thing wrong with the graph, just letting you know, okay? So a positive output gap. Here is number, what number are we on? Number 5. So number 5 in the Google form, you're going to tell me what is wrong with this graph. It is supposed to be showing me a negative output gap. You're going to tell me what's wrong. Number 6, supposed to be showing long run equilibrium. Take a look for the mistakes. Number 7, telling me what's wrong with the graph on number 7. We're almost done. Number 8, is this showing me a negative output gap? Yes, no, maybe so. Tell me the mistakes. Number 9, wow, there are way more than I thought. I thought it was like 4 or 5, and now we're up to number 9. Number 9 should be positive output gap. Surely number 10 is the last one. We'll see. There's number 10. What is wrong with graph number 10? It should be showing a negative output gap, so compare it to your graph, see what's wrong. And that is all. So I'm going to put those questions in the Google form. You're going to do those questions. Thank you very much. Good night.